separate religions. They are really different aspects of the one religion, which our founder, Swami Vivekananda, who founded this society in 1900, he called the one universal religion is spirituality. The appreciation, the sensing, the realization of that infinite reality, the Spirit, which is present everywhere, in everything, at all times. And it's given different names by different people. An ancient Sanskrit verse says, sages, truth is one, but sages call it by different names. So all those people that are referring to God, spirituality, whatever name they give to it, that which is beyond the physical and the spiritual dimensions, beyond the physical and psychological dimensions of life, that reality is one and is referred to by many different names. So the topic is the universal dimension of religion. That is to say, universality, the universal aspects of religion, that in each of our religions, which is universal and timeless. That is what we emphasize. That we're always happy to have as our guest speaker someone from another religion. And this year we're happy that Christianity, to be specific, Catholicism is represented by Father Michael Fish, who is a monk from the Camaldolese monastery. The Christian monasticism is an ancient tradition that goes back actually to just a couple of hundred years after the time of Christ.
Now this morning, I was having a friendly chat with Father Michael, and incidentally, I was referring to one very important historical fact. I am coming from a land, I was born and brought up in a land which is about 20 miles away, the place where St. Thomas landed in 52 AD. That was long before Christianity was accepted by the Roman Emperor Constantine. But these great ancient Hindu kings and Vedantins did not throw those great Christian ascetics for the lions and tigers to make tasty breakfast of them as they did in ancient Rome. Nor were they asked to fight as gladiators in the Roman amphitheater. What these ancient Vedantins and Hindu kings did was to hand over to them some ancient Hindu temples and tell them, you convert these temples into your churches and you worship your God in your own way. So gave them lands, towns, property and wealth. That community still survives with no less than 7 ancient churches dating back to 52 AD. Remember, that is long before Constantine declared Christianity as the national religion of Roman Empire. So, Vedanta looks upon all religions from a universal perspective. Every religion has got a universal dimension and also a dimension which is not so very universal, as we are already witnessing in today's world. So, this is a great opportunity for us to meet the representatives of the great spiritual tradition of Christianity. True religion is spirituality, and spirituality is a kind of universal spiritual idealism, where we all learn to look upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family. The whole humanity is just one spiritual family, where every act of service to our fellow human beings become an act of worship. Every noble, unselfish thought becomes an act of meditation, because we cannot love God and hate His children, other children belonging to other religions. So we can't do that. So if we love God, then we have to be friendly, we have to be compassionate, we have to be broad-minded towards our fellow human beings. Not only human beings, the whole kingdom of existence becomes a temple, and every act becomes an act of worship. The line of demarcation between secular and spiritual life disappears. The whole life becomes a spiritual performance. That is the only way to practice the universal dimension of religion. So first of all, I request Father Michael to present the universal dimension of religion from the standpoint of the great spiritual religious tradition of Christianity, which he represents. Thank you. Namaskar. Father Michael.
Good morning. If you go to an Italian restaurant, they always start with antipasta, and then you have the main meal, the pasta. So I want you just to know that I am the antipasta, and here's the pasta. So just take what I say with a pinch of salt, and as the surfers say, chill out, because the main meal is coming later. Doesn't he look like a main meal? So it's a real honor and privilege to be here this morning. It's my first time here, and the warm welcome that I've received from the Swamis makes me absolutely confident that this will not be my last visit here. So I feel really totally at home. My name is Michael Fish. I'm born in Johannesburg in South Africa, and at 22 years old I entered the Redemptorist community, which is a religious community in the Catholic tradition, mainly preaching the gospel to the poorest of the poor. And I was there for 26 years. And all the time during those 26 years, I had this niggling feeling in me that I couldn't get rid of, that I should be more monk. I should be living more a contemplative life. So at 46, eventually I gave in to the niggling, and I left the Redemptorists, left South Africa, and came to live with the Benedictines, the New Camaldoli community down at Big Sur. And I was there for 13 years, and I was shocked that that blasted niggling began again. The monks in the community have another word for it. They just say, Michael doesn't know where he's going to ever end up. But I call it divine niggling. So anyway, this niggling began again, and I asked permission for a year away from the community. And I began that year, it was my 60th birthday, I began that year by walking the ancient pilgrimage route across Spain called the Camino de Santiago. And I would like to take as what I think as a universal aspect of religion, I would like to take and unpack a little bit with you this morning the idea of pilgrimage as one aspect of our joint journeys, because that's what pilgrimage is, our joint journeys to the divine, but often one that we don't think of all that often. So I wish to begin with a small little poem by Wendell. And it's called, his poem is called A Spiritual Journey by Wendell. And the world cannot be discovered by a journey of miles, no matter how long, but only by a spiritual journey, a journey of 1 inch, very arduous, humbling, and joyful, by which we arrive ground at our feet and learn to be at home. I want to read it again. And the world cannot be discovered by a journey of miles, no matter how long, but only by a spiritual journey, a journey of 1 inch, very arduous, humbling, and joyful, by which we arrive at the ground at our feet and learn to be at home. So I began that year by deciding to walk the Camino. And the Camino begins in a little village in France. And so the first day of the Camino, you've got to cross, it's really a deep end experience, you've got to cross the Pyrenees as your first experience of it. And I got to the other side, and there's a rule with the Camino that you don't go with a group. You go on your own, because the Camino will tell you who she wants you to meet as you walk the road. Whereas if you go with a group, you eliminate her plans for you. So I went on my own, and I was on this journey that has been, it's a 1,200-year-old journey. Very, very popular in the Middle Ages. About 1 million people every year made it in the Middle Ages. Now about 500,000 people do it. This ancient pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, where tradition says, Swami was talking about where St. Thomas went in Kerala. Well, the tradition is that St. Diego, St. James, ended up in Spain. So this was this ancient journey across the top of Spain to the burial place, the body of St. James, one of the disciples of Jesus. The journey is 580 miles. And so I began, and on the first night, I arrived at one of the refugios, or hostels. There was a guy sitting next to me, his name was Alain. He was a Frenchman living in Spain. He was going to walk for a week, and we ended up walking the whole 35 days together. A few days later, as Alain and I were walking along, we met a young single mother from Berlin in Germany. She was only going to walk half the Camino, and she joined us, and so her name was Uta. So Uta, Alain, and I walked this journey. You walk in silence, that's the rule. You don't talk during the day, you walk in silence, and then you socialize in the evening when you settle down and you find your refugio. So that's what we did. We would walk in silence, meet in the evenings, and live in these very simple refugios. You'd get a passport, not a passport from America, but a Camino passport. You'd show your passport, and you'd be able to stay very cheaply at these hostels, and also get a very inexpensive meal at certain restaurants. This walking, these 35 days, made a huge impact on my life. The walking seemed to enter me. And since then, even to now, walking has become a major part of my spiritual practice. I walk every day as part of my evening prayer. It's almost like the walk of the Camino has got into my bones and into my spirit. It's my way of finding, meeting, encountering the divine. So I immediately realized as I was making this journey that I had brought too much equipment. So that's the story. On the first night, after crossing the Pyrenees, I left on my bed, this is the tradition, on my bed the next day over $200 of brand new REI equipment. And the only reason why I did it, broke my heart, the only reason why I did it was these muscles here weren't red, but they'd gone green crossing the. So the first thing I realized is I was carrying far too much. The second thing I realized about 4 or 5 days later is that the things that I'd left on that bed in the refugio were the wrong things. And I was still carrying things that I didn't need at all. So I had the panic then of emptying more from my bag, but realizing the things I really need were still there on that refugio bed. And that plunged me immediately into, it's good not to have everything you need. It's good to suddenly trust the journey. It's good to know that the journey will be there when you really need it. When you really have to need something, the journey comes up and answers our needs. So we walk, as I said, you walk in silence. And thank goodness Alan was a fast walker and Uta was a slow walker. So I found myself in the middle. I could see Alan up front and I could see Uta behind. And I was amazed. Once I felt there was nobody around, I was amazed at there were days when I wept. I walked and I wept. And I thought to myself, where are these tears? Where's this crying coming from? And as I walked, knowing that I was safe, Alan up there, Uta behind me. You know that macho thing, a guy can't be walking down the road crying like a baby. Once I knew I was safe, then I realized there was so much in my life I hadn't grieved. And this idea of the road opening up before me, this idea of silence, this idea of anonymity, up came in me all the things I had suffered and never mourned. I never mourned leaving South Africa. I never mourned leaving the Redemptorists. I wasn't there when my parents died. I never really mourned their dying, because what happens in our life? Life is so busy. We have a trauma and then we've got to get on with life. And yet in us there are pockets of sadness. I went and mourned over regrets, over all the missed opportunities in my life. And I wept also over the absolute joy of seeing the road, having the backpack, having my sticks, and having my life reduced to utter simplicity. That just made me weep. I also realized that walking does something to us. That rhythm of walking every day, 15, 20 miles every day for 35 days, what it does is it loosens the body. It loosens the muscles. And the reason why all those tears emerged in me was because everything that has happened to us in life, every single experience is caught in our body. And it's through the walking, it's through that rhythmic walking, day after day, that the walking releases what's in our body. But something else happened as well. The more I walked, and the more I could see Alan up front and knew Uta behind me, I found that the walking pulled me down into a place inside me I knew of and sort of had been into, but never to that extent. A new place, and yet an old place. A familiar place, and yet a completely strange place. A place deep inside my psyche, my soul. And the only reason I knew I was in this place is because I would fall into or be pulled into this deep place, and then I'd suddenly look up and there was Alan in front of me saying, "Michael, look at that," or "Have a look at this," or "See what I found." And the pain, the jarring, the jolt of being pulled from that place I didn't even know I was in, that place where I'd sunk down into, to answer Alan's need, was the only way I knew that I'd been in a different place. And then I had the same pain again after Alan moved off ahead of of sinking down again to that place. What is that place? That place is in all of us. That's the deep place in every one of us, no matter what our tradition is. And there's a gravity in us, a divine gravity, pulling us to that sacred place. And you haven't got to walk 580 miles to get it. It's all there for us. All we've got to do is be aware of this ancient and yet new, this familiar and yet strange place that's in each one of us, this sacred place. And what happens in that place? We begin to look outwardly from within, or we begin to look at life from that place within, and it's a completely different vision, a completely different experience of what we see. I think that's the definition of contemplation. Looking at life, but with eyes from within, from that deep place. The other thing that I learned is that every journey we make initiates, every outward journey we make initiates an inner journey. Every outward journey you make starts a journey inside you. The original name for, or the original root for the word pilgrim comes from Latin, per ager. A pilgrim is someone who ages. What does that mean? Who goes beyond their field. Per, beyond, ager, field. So the definition of a pilgrim is a person who has the courage to step beyond your field, beyond your safety zone. And that's something that we, I think, as modern men and women, we need to realize that if we don't step out of our field, if we don't step into the unknown, if we don't take a risk in our life, if we stay put, we grow old and tired and grey spiritually. Not only, but physically as well. Because there's something about per-agering. There's something about stepping out into the unknown that brings life and opens up in us the inner journey, which is what every outer journey is about. So I want to read to you a poem, perhaps one of my favorite poems, by Mary Oliver. Excuse me. And it's called The Journey. But listen to this as Mary Oliver talks to us about how we are called to per-ager, every one of us. And you can't say, no, Michael, I'm too old for that now. I'm into retirement. No, that's all right for my kids and for the young people. If you think of the Hebrew tradition, Abraham and Sarah were called by God to leave their country, their father's house and their home, and they were both 85. 85, that they set out on a journey not knowing where, following a God they didn't even know, following an inkling, an intuition. So those of you who are in the last quarter of life, no. Sorry. No, there's no excuse. This per-agering is for all of us. This is part and parcel of the spiritual call. So listen to Mary Oliver's call to us to per-ager. One day, you finally knew what you had to do. One day you woke up. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble. You felt the old tug at your ankles, all your kids crying, "Mend my life," each voice cried. But you didn't stop. This call this inkling was so strong, you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. You knew, and each one of us knows what we've got to do on this journey. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough. And that's for all of us. It's already late enough. So much of our life, of the journey of our life, is already past. It's already late enough. And a wild night. So one thing we must know, that the minute we decide to per-ager, to step out of our known, our comfort zone, we'll upset the family and all our friends and relatives and colleagues. That's number one. Number two is the universe, the divine, rolls up her sleeves and says, aha, she's going to step out of her field. I'm going to make it initially exceptionally difficult to see what she's made of. So don't get frightened when you do decide to step out and everything goes wrong. That's the divine testing your mettle. That's how she works. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundation, though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough and a wild night. And the road was full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, and the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, there was a new voice. There was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you can do, determined to save the only life you can save. Life is a journey, and one of the ways of making this journey and staying alive is walking. And when we do walk, we eventually find that we've arrived at home.
No.
Thank you, Father Michael, for that absolutely touching and heartfelt presentation of the spiritual dimension of the Christian faith. Now I request Swami Shandatmanandaji to present the Vedantic perspective. Swami Shandatmanandaji.
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतंगमय ओम शांति शांति शांति. Lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, and from death to immortality. Om peace, peace, peace. It has been an extraordinary morning and an unbelievable experience. I think it was really not necessary to invite another speaker after Father Fish. That's how they invite you and trap you. Swami Vedananji set the bar saying that the speakers will be decided by what they speak. And then Tattvamayananji, he gave an introduction which was more than a speech. And then to cap it all, we had Father Fish giving such an extraordinary account Finally, I am left high and dry. Father Fish has really made me fish out of water. Now coming to more sublime discussions. Swami Vedananji talked about how this place has been made holy. In fact, without referring to any traditional scripture, he said it. That is what is mentioned in one of the famous scriptures called Narada Bhakti Sutras, where it says, Tirthi Kurvanti Tirthani. How does a place really become a place of pilgrimage? We heard so much about pilgrimage from Father Fish. It says by people flocking in great numbers constantly to a place with the idea of connecting with the Supreme or the Sublime, with some noble thoughts, and coming there with a true import, true desire to indulge in spiritual practices, to do sadhana. That's how a place becomes a truly spiritual place or a place of pilgrimage. You can look up at the history of the celebrated places of pilgrimage all over the world, and you really find that each one has been built up that way. Obviously, this place is certainly a place of pilgrimage because the whole ambience, the whole atmosphere is so spiritually elevating. And of course, it's also an extremely humbling experience after listening to the talk of Father Fish. In essence, he touched upon an idea which I will come to a little later, which is central to the Hinduism as well as in particular to the Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition, the idea of sadhana or spiritual practice. Talking about this very ambient, this gathering, how it can really transform people. I think all of us who have listened to Father Fish today really feel that we have been taken to a different world altogether. That is what Sri Ramakrishna again and again stresses in his immortal words which are found in that text called the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Again and again he talks about satsanga or the company of the holy, its transforming power. I think all of us will clearly agree that coming here, being together in the company of such like-minded souls, it's really a transforming experience. That's what Sri Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita. Mat chitta madgata prana bodhayanta parasparam kateyantascha mam nityam tushyanti charamanti cha. He says, of course, instead of Krishna you can substitute any idea, any god, any tradition there. The idea is saying, my devotees who are totally dedicated to me, devoted to me, they constantly speak about my qualities, my greatness. They tell each other, similar like-minded people. And that is their only delight, that is their only sport, that is their only engagement. And what happens to such people? He comes out in the very next sloka, he says, Tesham satati yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadhami buddhiyo. He says, when people who are engaged that way, constantly thinking about me, speaking about my glories, singing my praise, to them I give this refined or an enlightened intellect where they can really decide, make the right choices in life, where their journey in the spiritual world will truly begin. So Sri Ramakrishna again and again talks about the power of the holy company of the satsanga. I would like to illustrate this with an incident from his own life, because these are some of the universal dimensions of religions across the board. Just as Father Fish talked about pilgrimage, pilgrimage is not the copyright of any particular religion or tradition. It's there in every tradition, in every religion. Similarly, this idea of satsanga or the company of holy. But what we really need is to highlight, bring forth, again and again share and discuss these ideas, these incidents, so that they make a deep dent, deep impression on our minds, and we carry home, they take home, and we again begin our own journey in our own little humble way. Because when we talk about the universal dimensions of religion, I think we should go even more fundamental and understand that religion itself is universal. That is perhaps the most fundamental or foundational aspect of human life itself. And unfortunately, a large group, both young and old, all over the world, are moving away from this idea of religion itself. So rather than trying to work out the nitty-gritties or settle scores that way, all of us would contribute enormously if we can really bring people, irrespective of their faith, back to this platform called religion, where we can all share, we can all live in harmony, be happy, and undertake a journey of pilgrimage together. So that is more important, rather than just trying to find out the minor differences or where they are universal, where they are not so universal. Yes, we need to understand, but much more than that, today we are in a very dire situation where people as a class are moving out of religion itself. And I think that's a more major problem, a more serious issue. So, you are also, we are able to see today a new group emerging who call themselves spiritual but not religious, SBNR. I think probably, these type of messages, the message of pilgrimage, the message of satsanga, the holy company, I think this should appeal to them too, because we are not talking about any religious, any ritual or any dogma, any something that is fundamental that way, but we are really talking about an universal and all-embracing dimension of religion. Now this satsanga or the holy company, how it can really transform people. Sri Ramakrishna's room in Dakshineswar was always a mark of joy. Whenever he was present, it was an unbelievable experience for those who were there. There used to be constant singing of the Lord's name, discussion on spiritual matters, soul elevating themes, and everyone there used to feel so uplifted, so much so, the compiler of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Mahendranath Gupta, or Master Mahashaya as he was formerly called, had a serious doubt. When he is around, when I am in his company, I feel so uplifted. All my worries take to flight. I am in a different world altogether. But when I go back home, it's again back to square one. There was serious misunderstanding between his wife and his own mother. There was a severe family problem, so much so his wife contemplated or even attempted suicide a couple of times. So he was in a very serious dilemma. When I am in his presence, I feel so uplifted. When I go back, it's totally different, again back to the old ways. What will happen when this great soul departs from this earth? So that is why, you will find in that book, every now and then the question, do people who live in this world, the householders, do they realize God? Is it possible for them? Can they realize God? in various ways, often in his own name, often in other pseudonames, in other names. Again and again he comes forward with this question, and every time Sri Ramakrishna assures him that it is possible, it's certainly possible. And one of the things which Sri Ramakrishna advocates again and again is the satsanga, or the company of the holy. Now, one day there was, as usual, a gathering of devotees in Sri Ramakrishna's room at Dakshineshwar, and as usual he was singing in great joy and discussing spiritual topics with the devotees there. Suddenly, a gentleman by name Manilal came there. That day, his 21-year-old son had died all of a sudden. He had gone to the cremation ground, performed the funeral rites, and straight he came to Dakshineshwar. He was sitting in a corner of the room, totally downcast and so full of sorrow, inconsolable. Initially no one noticed him, but soon others started taking notice of his presence, and they started consoling him in various ways. The usual things, as we always say, oh, the world is transitory, people who are born are bound to die, and so on. But none of them could make any impression whatsoever on Manilal. Finally, Sri Ramakrishna's eyes fell on him, and he asked him, Manilal, why are you so sorrowful? What happened? Then Wendell said, today I just lost my 21-year-old son. I've cremated him and I've come straight here. Sri Ramakrishna immediately did not say anything, but after a few moments, he recounted his own experience. Now, one of his brother's sons by name Akshay, he was once at Dakshineshwar. He was involved in some priestly duties. He had come there to serve as a priest. He was an extremely promising youngster, full of spiritual tendencies, and Sri Ramakrishna had great affection for him. But then this youngster fell sick, and then they were consulting some ordinary doctors. And Sri Ramakrishna suddenly blurted out, he told his attendant Hriday, who was his nephew, Hriday, what are they doing? They should show him to a good doctor, otherwise the boy would die. Hriday was shocked. He said, Uncle, whatever comes up out of your mouth becomes true. Why did you say this? You know, I don't say anything on my own. It was a divine mother who made me say this. And the boy really died. And Sri Ramakrishna was present on the very scene, at the scene. And then he was virtually in ecstasy at that time. Then Sri Ramakrishna started singing an extraordinary song in Bengali, which runs as follows. It says, O Jiva, O soul, get ready for the battle, put on the war dress, war clothes. The Lord of Death is trying to enter your house, be prepared to tackle him head on, and so forth. And you know, he had such an extraordinary voice and he could sing with such feelings. Everyone felt so uplifted. The whole atmosphere was surcharged with spiritual feeling and mood. And then he slowly came and sat by the side of Manilal and then started explaining, you see Manilal, birth, death, etc. are inescapable. But he alone is the wise person who learns lessons, who knows how to accommodate, adjust, get along with life, understand the real nature of this existence itself on earth, and so on. And by the time he finished the explanation, Manilal was completely assuaged. He said, that is why I came straight from the burning heart to this place. I knew that no one else could wipe out this sorrow from my heart. That's the power of the company of the holy. When like-minded people in such an atmosphere, it can really bring tremendous relief readers of extraordinary, unbelievable incidents of sorrow. I'd also like to share a small incident which happened in my own life. You know, in Delhi, because I feel I really envy the Swamis in the States, because they don't have to meet even 1/10 of the people that we have to meet every day. Morning to night, innumerable visitors. You can't shut the door, you can't set up your voicemail and say that it's not possible. So, you know, one day, a friend of mine who had retired as a very big official in the income tax department of the government of India, he rang me up to say that one of his former colleagues wants to meet me. And he came along with his sister and the sister's husband. I was surprised that after so many years he could track me down and come. And then, you know, he said, Swamiji, I have come because of my sister. You please talk to her. She started. She said, Maharaj, this is how they usually address Swamis in India. I have a son who is studying for engineering. He's a very bright student. He is doing well. I had a 12-year-old daughter who was exceptionally good in everything, in music, in dance, in looks, in her behavior. She was the darling of the entire household. Not only that, her school, associates, teachers, everyone. Suddenly she developed some fever or so. We took her to a doctor. We recommended that we admit her in a hospital. We admitted. A couple of days later, they transferred her to an intensive care unit. And 2 days later, she died. We are religious people. We don't do anything wrong. We are very moral, ethical people. Why this happened to us? Now I try to console her in the normal, usual way. And I could clearly see that it was not making any impression whatsoever. Then I said, you see, I can understand. I really can't remove your grief right now. But will you do a small thing, a small piece of advice which I am going to give you? She agreed. I said, remember, you shouldn't allow this sorrow to be just wiped out in an ordinary way. I said, I can quote innumerable instances where people come with a tremendous sense of sorrow or grief, but then after a few days, they are back to their old ways, trying to participate in every activity of the world. Don't do that. Don't build castles on your son. Let him study, let him be on his own. You keep this sorrow in your heart, and you must seek an answer from God and God only. Don't allow this sorrow to be just assuaged in an ordinary way through ordinary incidents. And I said, I have a prescription. Go to the bookstore below, buy this book called The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Read 5 pages of it every day, not more than that. But read it at a time when you are fairly settled in mind, whether in the morning as the first business or at the end of the day when you are through with everything else. Read 5 pages. The next day you think about whatever you had read. I assure you, within 2 years you will get an answer. And if you don't get an answer, you come back to me. I am answerable. She accepted my prescription. And then before she departed, I said, can I ask you a small question? Yes. I said, suppose by some divine intervention or magic or whatever you might call it, you are gifted with a vision by which you are able to see right now your daughter is in such a place, she is 1,000 times more happier than when you are in her home. She is dancing, she is going about, she has everything, the gifts and the other items which she possesses, you can't even imagine. Will you still grieve? Will you still be sorrowful? She was really stopped in her tracks. No, Swamiji, I will not cry then. I said, leave it as such. I'm not saying what happened was good, but we really do not know. We can't understand life. I say this book, this holy company will solve your problem in 2 years. In fact, within months, she called me from Calcutta to say that, Swamiji, I want formal initiation or mantra diksha from the president of the order. Can you arrange? I said, I don't have to do anything. Simply go and meet the secretary of President Maharaj and just briefly tell her your background. You will be given initiation out of turn. She took initiation. She's much more settled. Her son has got a good job. She is far, far better, and she has recovered enormously. So when you talk about the universal dimensions of religion, just as he talked about pilgrimage, I would say that this company of the holy has extraordinary powers of bringing about changes, transformations in our life.
Arjuna, one question, Arjuna the disciple asked the same question which you put just now, indirectly. What happens to those of us who don't fully succeed, who fall by the wayside? Are we doomed? Krishna says no. Even a little bit of spiritual practice, if you have just helped somebody to cross the street, a blind man sitting on the other side, you help him to cross the street, or a noble flashing thought in your mind, or half an hour you read a good holy book with real sincerity, that will create a spiritual bank in your account, and you can draw your check in next life. You are never late and nothing is lost.
Amen.
These two messages, you are never late and nothing is lost.